Angela Hill versus Ashley Yoder. We got minus 300 and rising for Angela Hill and plus 240 for the Spider Monkey Ashley Yoder. Now, this is a rematch from a fight that happened in 2017 at the Ultimate Fighter 28 finale, I believe it was, but it was the night that Michael Johnson welcomed Justin Gaethje to the UFC, and we got a spectacular fight between them. But Angela Hill came out ahead in that fight against Ashley Yoder, where she was able to, keep the fight on the feet for the most part. She did get taken down a couple times, but again, did spring up to the feet and did some good damage from the striking realm, especially with her kicks, and that definitely gave her the advantage and the victory that night. In terms of recently though, actually that was I do want to touch on this. That was the second stint for Angela Hill in the UFC. If you guys remember, she was on the Ultimate Fighter 20, had a couple fights, went on a 2-fight losing streak to Tisha Torres and Rose Namajunas, who was only 4 fights deep into her career at the time, gets cut from the UFC, goes down to an Invicta, wins 4 fights, including capturing that Invicta title, and then comes back into the UFC, I believe on short notice, against Jessica Andrade, and she drops that fight. The next fight for her was against Ashley Yoder. Now, since Angela Hill has been back in the UFC, her record is now 6-7, which is a little bit salty, but a lot of people will say that she probably deserved the victories against Claudia Gadelha and Michelle Watterson. But Angela Hill has nobody to blame but herself, and everybody can tell her that she always fights close to her opponents. She never really changes up her game much. She always has volume, but her opponents are always able to land good shots in return, maybe more damaging shots, more shots that are more impactful in the judges' eyes. Whereas Angela Hill just continues to do the same thing, right? She normally is the one kind of marching forward and stalking her opponent and landing some good shots from the outside, but she still eats shots in return, and it may look worse on the judges in the judges' eyes than it does for other opponents. Now, in her last fight, she did have a main event against Michelle Watterson. They were taking that fight, or at least that main event slot, on short notice since Alexander Rakic and Glover Teixeira and Thiago Santos were not able to go that night. But we saw them ready to go 5 rounds. Michelle Watterson had already been 5 rounds several times. Angela Hill had been to 5 rounds a couple times as well. But we saw Michelle Watterson, pull ahead in that fight. There were a lot of different scorecards on that from all 3 judges, but they did unanimously give it to Angela Hill in that fight, to Michelle Watterson. But that was one again where we saw Angela Hill marching down Michelle Watterson, Watterson doing a good enough job in terms of landing counter strikes and landing strikes of her own, not to mention getting a takedown here and there and doing some good damage from on top, as well as accruing a solid amount of control time. And that's where I kind of lean on here with Ashley Yoder, who, back when they fought in 2017, she was a purple belt. And she's just been working her butt off, and now she's a black belt. So I feel like if she does get this fight back to the ground and back to the positions that gave Angela Hill some fits, she might be a little bit more disciplined and be able to keep that top position and not really let it get away from her like she did in that fight against Angela Hill the first time around, right? We saw her fight Miranda Granger last time around, and I believe she dropped that first round, and then the second and third, we saw her truly start to come forward, get the takedowns relatively quickly as well, too, and even enough to get a 10-8 on pretty much all 3 judges' scorecards in that third round against Miranda Granger. So Yoder is improving on a fight-to-fight basis, though. Now, they both still have salty records, 12-9 for Hill, 8-6 for Ashley Yoder, but I think that, Yoder being slightly younger at 33 years old, 36 for Angela Hill, I think this fight should be much closer in terms of odds. Now, I'm not talking about like pick'em or minus 150 or something like that, or like a minus 120, minus 125, but I still give Ashley Yoder roughly like a 40-ish% chance of winning. Plus 300 would indicate that she has a 25% chance of winning, and I think that's a little bit too optimistic, especially if you're an Angela Hill backer. We know she fights close fights. Why are you willing to pay the chalk on a woman that fights close fights like this? And I don't care if they, fought each other in the past and Angela Hill beat her that time. It wasn't a blowout by any means. Ashley Yoder still shows that she kind of have the chops to go out there, take her opponents down, use her size and her strength against them. She's gonna have a 4-inch height advantage here, as well as a 5-inch reach advantage. I think she will be able to close the distance here, bully Angela Hill up against the cage, get her to the ground. Not to mention showing off that work that she's been doing at Dan Henderson's training camp. You know what I mean? A lot of the work that you see on her IG and some of the footage that's being released is her working up against the cage, working up against the wall, trying to get takedowns from there. But that's her game. Get that black belt going. And I'd be surprised if we see Angela Hill keep the distance consistently for 15 minutes. So yeah, you bet your ass I'd be willing to take a little bit of a sprinkle on Yoder at plus 300. Now, I will take Angela Hill to win this fight, as I do think that she should be able to keep this fight on the feet for the most part and really land some good damage from the outside. But I'm not counting out Ashley Yoder. If this was a 50-50 fight in terms of the odds, I'd probably lean Angela Hill here in terms of making a bet on her. Or actually not even a bet, but at least saying that okay, this is a fight that Angela Hill should win. But at the odds that are currently indicated, and again, they're only going to get worse. I only expect them to get worse as the fight week goes on, as I believe that people are going to continue to parlay Angela Hill in this spot, and I think that's going to be a very bad mistake. I think that Yoder is live here. If she hits plus 300 on one of my books, I'm going to have to at least take a 0.5 unit stab. There's just too much value there to pass up, given the improvements that we've seen from her, given the fact that we've still seen Angela Hill getting taken down in her fights. Most of her fights, she's still getting taken down. That's a concern for me. And against a solid black belt like Ashley Yoder, I think Angela Hill could be in some issues and maybe struggle to get back to her feet. But, from what we've seen in her last several fights, she is able to get back to her feet. She's able to do some good work and kind of make up for that control time that she gave up, which is why I'll predict Angela Hill to win here. But from a betting perspective, I'd be on the Ashley Yoder side. And that's the side that I would probably make a bet on. Again, only a half unit play here, especially at plus 300. You don't need to risk too much to make at least a good little a bit of coin there, and that's the way I'm gonna be looking to approach this fight. So I'll take Angela Hill to win this fight via decision, but don't be surprised if you see me with the Ashley Yoder ticket by the time this fight goes down.